Nathan Hale had spent nearly 15 years carving a living from a lonely stretch of Arizona territory where survival depended less on luck than on stubbornness. His ranch sat miles away from the nearest settlement, surrounded by dry hills, scattered mesquite trees, and endless dust trails that carried both opportunity and danger. Travelers passing through often warned him about the Apache bands roaming nearby. They spoke of raids, stolen horses, and vanished wagons, insisting that anyone living alone was only waiting for disaster. Nathan had heard every frightening story imaginable, but years on the frontier had taught him something different. Fear made people careless, while patience kept them alive. He rarely judged anyone by rumors alone. Instead, he judged them by the choices they made when no one else was watching. That philosophy had already cost him friendships. Neighbors believed Nathan was too soft. He refused to join posses organized solely to hunt Apache families after attacks whose true culprits were never confirmed. When asked why he stayed neutral, Nathan simply answered that revenge blinded men faster than anger ever could. His words earned him suspicious looks and quiet resentment. In frontier towns, neutrality was often mistaken for betrayal. The drought had entered its third month. Every creek had disappeared except for a single spring hidden beneath a rocky ridge not far from Nathan's grazing fields. His father had discovered it years earlier and built a deep stone-lined well around it. Without that water, neither Nathan nor his cattle would survive another season. He protected the place carefully but never locked it away. Water, he believed, belonged first to life before it belonged to any man. One afternoon Nathan noticed fresh tracks leading toward the spring. They were not made by cattle or horses from neighboring ranches. The footprints were smaller, lighter, and mixed with moccasin prints. Someone had come searching for water. Instead of reaching for his rifle immediately, Nathan studied the ground. The tracks wandered uncertainly, stopping often as if whoever made them lacked the strength to continue. He followed them cautiously through the brush until he reached the spring. There he froze. A young Apache woman knelt beside the water with a wooden bucket. Beside her sat an older woman whose breathing came in painful gasps. Two frightened children clung to her, their faces covered with dust. None of them carried weapons in their hands. Their clothing showed days of hard travel, and exhaustion weighed heavier on them than fear. The younger woman noticed Nathan first. She stood instantly, placing herself between him and the children. Her chin lifted with quiet determination even though she could barely remain steady on her feet. She expected him to raise his rifle. Nathan looked from her to the older woman struggling to breathe. Every warning he had ever heard echoed inside his head, yet another voice spoke louder. No family reached such desperation unless every other choice had failed. Without speaking, he slowly removed the rifle from his shoulder and leaned it against the stone well where everyone could see he was not holding it. Then he lowered the bucket into the spring, filled it with clear water, and placed it several feet away before stepping back. The Apache woman stared at him in disbelief. She hesitated for several long seconds before cautiously picking up the bucket. The children rushed toward it, drinking desperately until the older woman gently stopped them and made them share. Nathan watched silently as life slowly returned to their faces. The younger woman finally spoke a single English word. "Why?" Nathan answered quietly. "Because you're thirsty." She searched his face, trying to understand whether it was a trick. Years of conflict had taught both sides that kindness often hid danger. Yet Nathan neither approached nor threatened them. "My name is Nathan," he said. She remained silent before replying, "Ayanna." The older woman whispered something in Apache. Ayanna nodded respectfully before helping her drink again. Nathan noticed a deep wound wrapped with torn cloth around the older woman's leg. The bandage had turned dark with dried blood. "She needs help," he said. Ayanna's eyes narrowed. "Help costs. Not today." Nathan returned to his ranch and came back carrying clean bandages, dried beef, cornmeal, and a small bottle of medicine. Every step toward them increased the risk they might misunderstand his intentions, but he refused to let fear decide his actions. He knelt several feet away and placed everything on the ground before backing away once more. Ayanna carefully inspected each item, expecting poison or deception. Finding neither, she cleaned the wound while Nathan explained how to use the medicine. Though language separated them, compassion needed few words. As the sun lowered, hoofbeats thundered across the plain. Nathan turned sharply. 6 armed ranchers rode toward the spring led by Amos Carter, a cattle owner whose hatred for the Apache had become legendary after losing his brother years earlier. Amos spotted the family immediately. "There they are," he shouted. Rifles were raised. Nathan stepped directly between the riders and the Apache family. "They're not a threat," he said firmly. Amos glared. "Move." "No. They're Apache. They're people." One rider laughed bitterly. "Looks like you've forgotten whose side you're on." Nathan never moved. "You'll have to ride through me first." The silence that followed felt heavier than any gunfight. Amos studied Nathan's face, expecting hesitation, but found none. Finally he lowered his rifle just enough to speak. "When they kill you someday, don't expect us to bury what's left." The riders wheeled their horses around and disappeared in a cloud of dust, though Nathan knew they would remember exactly what they had witnessed. Ayanna looked at him differently now. Suspicion had not disappeared, but something else had appeared beside it, confusion. She had expected cruelty because that was what years of war had taught her. Instead, a stranger had risked his own life for people he had every reason to fear. That evening Nathan insisted they rest inside an old storage barn where they could recover safely. He slept outside with his rifle across his knees, not because he feared the Apache family, but because he knew other men might return. Near midnight, the horses became restless. Nathan quietly stood. Shapes moved beyond the fence. Not one or two. Many. At first he believed Amos had returned with more ranchers. Then moonlight revealed silent figures wearing feathers and carrying bows. Apache warriors. Nathan counted at least 15. They had come for the family. Or perhaps they had come for him. Nathan tightened his grip on the rifle but kept the barrel pointed toward the ground. The Apache warriors emerged from the darkness without making a sound, their movements so disciplined that even the horses barely sensed them until they were already inside the outer edge of the ranch. At their front walked a broad-shouldered warrior whose long black hair was tied behind him with eagle feathers woven into it. His face carried the scars of countless battles, and his eyes never left Nathan. Every instinct told Nathan that a single wrong move could turn the quiet night into bloodshed. Behind him, Ayanna stepped out of the barn. The moment she saw the warriors, relief flashed across her face. She spoke rapidly in Apache, pointing first toward her injured grandmother, then toward Nathan. The chief listened without interrupting. Several warriors immediately hurried to the elderly woman, checking her wound and speaking softly to the frightened children. Nathan remained still, refusing to interfere. The chief finally approached until only a few feet separated them. Neither man smiled. Neither lowered his guard completely. "You helped them," the chief said in careful English. Nathan nodded once. "They needed water." The chief studied him for a long moment before replying. "Many white men would have taken prisoners instead." "I'm not many white men." Silence settled again before the chief slowly extended his hand. Nathan hesitated only briefly before accepting it. The handshake lasted only a second, yet it carried more meaning than any treaty signed by politicians hundreds of miles away. "My name is Chaska," the chief said. "Ayanna is my daughter." Nathan released his hand. "Glad your family is safe." One of the younger warriors stepped forward carrying a leather pouch. He offered it to Nathan, but Nathan gently pushed it back. "I didn't help them for payment." Chaska nodded with quiet respect. "Then we owe you something greater than payment." Before dawn, the Apache group disappeared into the hills with Ayanna, her grandmother, and the children. As they left, Ayanna looked back only once. She raised her hand slightly in silent gratitude before vanishing among the rocks. Nathan believed the encounter had ended. He was wrong. 3 days later he rode into town for supplies. The atmosphere felt different the moment he arrived. Conversations stopped as people watched him. Doors closed. Men standing outside the general store stared openly. Amos Carter stepped into the street. "So it's true," Amos said loudly. "You're protecting Apaches now." Nathan calmly tied his horse to the hitching post. "I protected a family. You protected the enemy. They weren't attacking anyone. That doesn't matter." Several ranchers gathered behind Amos, each carrying rifles. Nathan realized rumors had spread faster than truth ever could. "You're becoming one of them," another man shouted. Nathan answered quietly, "Helping thirsty children doesn't make someone a traitor." Amos pointed toward him. "When those same people burn another ranch, remember today." Nathan bought his supplies without another word and rode home beneath dozens of hostile eyes. That evening he noticed smoke rising in the distance. Not ordinary campfire smoke. Too much. He climbed the nearest ridge and froze. His northern pasture was burning. Flames raced through the dry grass, driven by the wind. Panicked cattle crashed through broken fences while sparks spread toward the main barn. Nathan spurred his horse downhill, knowing he could never stop the fire alone. Then another sound reached him. Hoofbeats. Dozens of them. Nathan turned, expecting Amos and his men. Instead, Apache riders burst over the ridge. At their front rode Chaska. Without wasting a second, the warriors split into groups. Some drove the cattle away from the flames while others beat burning grass with wet blankets. Several dug trenches to stop the fire from spreading. Ayanna and other women formed a line carrying buckets from the spring Nathan had shared only days earlier. Nathan worked beside them until his arms felt too heavy to lift. Hours later, the fire finally died. Nearly every building still stood. Most of the cattle had survived. Nathan looked across the blackened pasture and realized none of it would have been possible without the very people everyone had called his enemies. As the exhausted group rested, Chaska knelt and examined unusual hoofprints near the burned fence. "These are not Apache horses," he said. Nathan looked closer. The horseshoes matched ranch stock. Someone had deliberately started the fire. The next morning, fresh tracks led toward Amos Carter's property. Nathan wanted answers, but Chaska stopped him. "Anger hides truth," he warned. Together they followed the trail until they reached a narrow canyon where they overheard voices. Nathan recognized Amos immediately. "We almost had him," Amos growled. Another rancher kicked an empty kerosene barrel. If the fire had spread faster, everyone would blame the Apache. Nathan felt his stomach tighten. The attacks, the stolen cattle, even the burned wagons blamed on nearby tribes suddenly began to make sense. Someone had been feeding hatred for profit. As frightened settlers abandoned their land, Amos had quietly purchased ranch after ranch for almost nothing. Nathan stepped into the open. So this was never about revenge. Every man spun around. Amos cursed under his breath. "You should have stayed out of this. You framed innocent people." Amos slowly raised his rifle. Before he could fire, Apache warriors emerged silently along the canyon walls with bows already drawn. Nathan also raised his rifle, though he hoped he would never need it. For several tense seconds, nobody moved. Then Amos realized he was completely surrounded. He lowered his weapon first. The sheriff arrived later that afternoon after several honest ranchers, finally seeing the evidence, rode into town to report everything. Hidden supplies of stolen livestock, branded cattle, and barrels of lamp oil were discovered on Amos's land. Witnesses admitted they had followed his orders for years, believing every lie he told about Apache raids. The truth spread across the territory far more quickly than the rumors ever had. Some neighbors apologized to Nathan. Others never did. It no longer mattered. Weeks later, Nathan repaired the stone well that had brought strangers together. This time he carved no name into it and claimed no ownership. One afternoon Ayanna returned with her father and several members of their people. They helped rebuild fences, repaired damaged barns, and traded horses, leather goods, and fresh vegetables with nearby ranchers. Suspicion did not disappear overnight, but conversations slowly replaced threats. Children who had once hidden behind their parents now watched each other with curiosity instead of fear. As the final fence post was set into the ground, Chaska stood beside Nathan overlooking the valley. "One bucket of water," Chaska said quietly. "That is where all of this began." Nathan smiled. "No." Chaska looked at him. "It began the moment someone chose not to hate." The two men stood in silence as ranchers and Apache families worked side by side below them, proving that courage was not always measured by winning battles. Sometimes it was measured by refusing to create another one. The water Nathan had offered had done far more than save a single family. It had broken a cycle of fear, exposed the real enemy hiding behind prejudice, and opened the door to trust where hatred had ruled for generations. From that day forward, travelers crossing the frontier spoke of the lonely ranch where strangers became allies, not because of a treaty or a victory, but because one man believed that mercy was stronger than revenge. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, comment, and share this video. Your support helps bring more unforgettable Wild West stories to the channel. Thanks for watching.